I'm Linda, and this is No Frills ASMR. I was just kind of looking through my bookcase, and I found this book that I forgot I even had. I must have gotten it at the used book store. I don't remember. It says The War of 1812 by the Dawn's Early Light. So, just thought we could take a look and learn a little bit about the War of 1812. This book is by Heather E. Schwartz and was published in 2017, it looks like. The War That Inspired an Anthem. Yeah, Francis Scott Key was in Baltimore. I've been to the museum where they talk about this. It's interesting. As battle raged during the War of 1812, Francis Scott Key looked out his window. He saw the American flag raised high and proud over Maryland's Fort McHenry. That's right, that's the fort. He was overcome. He knew this meant the Americans at the fort had refused to surrender to British soldiers. The United States was victorious at Fort McHenry. A sense of pride ran through him. Key began to write. His words spilled out on the back of a letter. His poem would later become the country's national anthem, the Star-Spangled Banner. Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight o'er the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rocket's red glare, the bombs bursting in air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say, does that star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave? Why war? The road to war was a bumpy one. Many Americans did not wish to go to war with Great Britain, but a series of events and policies made leaders reconsider. Trouble trading. The Napoleonic Wars raged among France, Great Britain, and many other countries in Europe. This series of wars began in 1803 and ended in 1815. It was a continuation of a larger conflict in Europe. While at war, both French and the British wanted to harm the other by blocking trade. The United States tried to remain neutral. However, both countries made this impossible. Each passed laws to stop the United States from trading with the other. These laws hurt the U.S. economy. And they have pictures here of the ships, the tall sail ships. Here's Napoleon and his troops defeat Russia at the Battle of Friedland. In the early 1800s, France was in turmoil. They had been fighting the French Revolutionary Wars. During this time, dictator Napoleon Bonaparte rose to power. The Napoleonic Wars began as he tried to expand his empire. Americans were upset about the restrictions on trade, but they were also angry over British policy called impressment. The British forces were British citizens who had deserted the Royal Navy. Sorry, I read something wrong. The British forced sailors off American ships to serve in the British Royal Navy. Some sailors were British citizens who had deserted the Royal Navy. They did not want to fight in Europe's war. Others were American citizens. Regardless, if the sailors could not prove they were American, the British captured them. Impressment. Okay, this shows how bad my schooling was. I've never heard this. I'm unfamiliar with. President Thomas Jefferson wanted to protect American sailors. He also wanted to punish Great Britain and France. He signed the Embargo Act of 1807. It stopped almost all American trade. He hoped that it would make Great Britain and France lose money, but it hurt the United States more than it hurt the other countries. Congress replaced the law in 1809. The new law was called the Non-Intercourse Act. Bummer. It forbade trade with Great Britain and France, but it allowed the United States to trade with other countries. Okay. Conflicts with the American Indians. In early 1800s, Americans also wanted to expand the country. They pushed into American Indian land. See, I would call that Native American. That seems like odd language. The British knew tribes worried about losing their homes. They encouraged tribes to fight back. Tecumseh and his brother, Tenskwatawa, were American Indian leaders. They worked to unite many tribal nations. They wanted to stop people from taking over their land. The two men gathered an army of American Indians. While Tecumseh was away in 1811, his brother was left in charge of their army. Tenskwatawa heard that U.S. soldiers were near his people. He wanted to strike first, so he sent his army into the Battle of Tippecanoe. They attacked U.S. troops, but they were forced to retreat and lost the battle. Tecumseh returned to a much weaker army. He saw that his people could not defeat the United States, so they joined forces with Great Britain, with tribes siding with the British. U.S. leaders saw further cause to declare war. War hawks kept calling for war. They wanted Great Britain to stay out of their business. Madison agreed. He thought it was time to fight. The United States goes to war. Mr. Madison's War. President Madison did not want to go to war with Great Britain, but under mounting pressure, Madison asked Congress to declare war. When the war didn't go well, angry Americans began calling it Mr. Madison's War. In September of 1813, 9 U.S. ships fought 6 British ships. They met on Lake Erie off the coast of Ohio. The British had better weapons. Their guns could shoot cannonballs almost 1 mile. The Americans had guns that could only shoot about a half a mile. For hours, the wind kept U.S. forces from getting close enough to attack. Seizing their chance, the British fired for hours upon the U.S. ships. They virtually destroyed it. Finally, the wind shifted. American troops were within range for attack. The battle ended in a U.S. victory. The United States reclaimed Detroit, Detroit, as the French called it. Dolly saves George. Rebuilding and renaming. The White House has been called the President's House, the Executive Mansion, and the President's Palace. Oh, don't tell Trump that. He'll want to change it back. It took 2 years to rebuild the home after the fire. It was officially named the White House in 1901. Battle of Fort McHenry. Inspiring flag. Americans suspected the British would attack Fort McHenry, so a woman named Mary Pickersgill made a massive flag for the fort. It was 30 feet by 42 feet and weighed 50 pounds. It was an impressive sight. And there's Key seeing the flag that inspired him to write the song Ending the War. Peace talks took place in Ghent, Belgium. They ended in December 1814 when the United States and Great Britain signed a treaty on Christmas Eve. It was called the Treaty of Peace and Amity between His Britannic Majesty, and the United States of America. It is also known as the Treaty of Ghent. Ghent. I feel like I should know how to say that. The peace treaty focused on ending the war. It ordered a return to life the way it was before the war began. It said that territories, places, and possessions won during the war had to be returned. The war did not end after the peace treaty was signed. Both countries had to ratify the treaty to end the war. Great Britain ratified it on December 8th of 1814, but the news took over a month to reach the United States. So on January 8th, 1815, both sides met in New Orleans for one final battle. Great Britain attacked the United States. More than 10,000 British troops closed in on New Orleans. The plan to take over the city, the 5,500 U.S. troops were greatly outnumbered and lacked experience. But they had a secret weapon, Andrew Jackson. Jackson was a strategic planner. His army lacked experience in battle. It was mostly made up of volunteers, free black men, and even a few pirates. And they were outnumbered 2-1. But Jackson helped his troops protect and defend themselves. They built a long barrier made of dirt and fought from behind it. When British troops approached, U.S. forces fired rifles and cannons. They killed or wounded about 2,600 British troops. With fewer than 100 lives lost, the United States won the battle. Congress ratified the Treaty of Ghent on February 16, 1815. President Madison declared the war finally over. Battle of New Orleans. After the war, Americans were in patriotic mood after the War of 1812. The country was more independent than ever. The economy thrived because trade with Great Britain had been banned during the war. Americans began making goods themselves. As a result, factories grew. The country itself grew too. Great Britain was no longer involved with Eastern tribes. The British did not need them to help fight. The United States moved forward with earlier plans. It expanded into tribal lands. Sadly, this meant that many tribes had to give up their land and move west. The war had an effect on other countries too. Canada was more patriotic after the war. Settlers in Canada had fought to defend their home. They felt a new connection to the country. Canada later won its independence from British rule in 1867. Great Britain moved on after the war. The British defeated Napoleon in the Battle of Waterloo. It was a great victory for them. It overshadowed earlier losses on U.S. soil. Well, there you go. There is an account of the Battle of 1812. Let's just take a quick look here. What day? What if it's a number? Where are you putting that? War of 1812, 266 and 267. 66 and 267. War of 1812, a war between Britain and the United States fought between 1812 and 1815. The War of 1812 has also been called the Second American War for Independence. It began over alleged British violations of American shipping rights, such as the impressment of seamen, the forcing of American merchant sailors to serve on British ships. American soldiers attacked Canada unsuccessfully in the war, and the British retaliated by burning the White House and other buildings in Washington, D.C. American warships frequently prevailed over British vessels. See, we have met the enemy, and they are ours. We'll have to look that up. Okay. The greatest victory of the Americans came in the Battle of the New Orleans, in which Andrew Jackson was the commanding general. A battle fought, ironically, 2 weeks after the peace treaty ending the war had been signed, but before the armies could be informed. Here's "We have met the enemy, and they are ours." A message sent from the naval battle of Lake Erie in the War of 1812, announcing a victory for the United States. The naval commander, Oliver Hazard Perry, addressed the words to the American land armies. What else do they say? Star Spangled. Here's Tecumseh, a Shawnee chief of the late 18th and early 19th centuries. He took arms against American settlers moving into the Middle West and supported the British in the War of 1812, in which he was killed. Here are Shawnees, a tribe of Native Americans who inhabited Ohio, Indiana, and other parts of the Middle West during the early 19th century. The most famous Shawnee leader was Tecumseh, who joined with the British against the Americans during the War of 1812. What else should we look up? Here's James Madison, a political leader of the late 18th and early 19th centuries. This is James Madison, one of the founding fathers. Madison was a member of the Continental Congress, a leader in the drafting of the Constitution. He worked tirelessly for its adoption by the states, contributing several essays to the Federalist Papers. He served as president from 1809 to 1817 after Thomas Jefferson. The United States fought the War of 1812 during his presidency. He belonged to the Democratic-Republican Party. He was married to one of the most celebrated president's wives, Dolly Madison. I know Dolly from her cupcakes. Here is Dolly Madison, the wife of President James Madison. Dolly Madison was known for her wit and her grace as a hostess. She is also remembered for her calmness in the face of the British invasion of Washington, D.C. in the War of 1812. She saved many documents stored in the White House, along with a portrait of George Washington by Gilbert Stuart. Here's Andrew Jackson, a general and political leader of the late 18th and early 19th centuries. As a general in the War of 1812, he defeated the British in the Battle of New Orleans. He was called Old Hickory Jackson. Was elected president after John Quincy Adams. I'm reading this wrong. Was elected. Okay. He was called Old Hickory Jackson. He was called. Sorry, this sentence isn't adding up. He was called Old Hickory Jackson. Was elected president after John Quincy Adams as a candidate of the common man, and his style of government came to be known as Jacksonian democracy. I don't know why that sentence confused my brain. He rewarded his political supporters with positions. He rewarded his political supporters with positions once he became president. See spoils system. We'll have to look that up. A Democrat, Jackson was widely criticized for expanding the power of the presidency beyond what was customary before his time. Interesting. Spoils system. It must be somewhere else. Let's look up spoils system. Spoils system, page 341. 341. Spoils system, awarding government jobs to the loyal supporters of a victorious party. Originally used to encourage more people to become actively involved in policy making, the spoils system quickly became a method of establishing and perpetuating party power. Try to say perpetuating party power 10 times. Yeah, I don't think I've ever seen it done in my lifetime as much as it has during this presidency, I would say. I don't know if that's true. It feels that way. I'm pretty sure it's true. Okay, well, I think we've learned a lot about the War of 1812. Have we? I don't know. Maybe I'll do a video just looking through this book a little bit. Here's the Battle of Waterloo. The Battle of Waterloo. A battle in Belgium in 1815 in which the British defeated the French under Napoleon Bonaparte. Napoleon abdicated as emperor a few days after final defeat, and a few weeks later he was captured and sent into exile. The British were led by Arthur Wellesley, later to be named Duke of Wellington. They were joined by Dutch and German soldiers and were greatly aided by the last-minute arrival of 50,000 troops from the German Kingdom of Prussia. Waterloo has become a general term for a decisive and final defeat.